Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. We are here to talk about the last chapter. The
This is it,
last
folks.
chapter.
This is it. This is all there's going to be. I hope you are not too well, I hope you are a little disappointed actually. But not too disappointed. But yeah, I'm it's okay. I can read it again, but
Yes.
I will miss conversing about this with you. So, but
Oh, the nice thing is, even though we are through with this book after tonight, we're doing, as we've mentioned the last couple of times, we are doing another book after this. So we'll still be talking about books,
we will.
just a
And I thought
different
I had
book.
it right here to show you. And it's somewhere. Oh, there it is. Sorry, it's in this stack of books, not that stack of books.
A different
Uh,
stack of books.
huh? Well, the other one is my kids' books, and then there's a stack of books that I'm book talking, and then there's a stack of books that I need to get through because they're due back at the library. And among the, this was with the library books, which it shouldn't have been. But I don't really have a. This is the book talk that I'm. This is the book that I'm going to be book talking next stack because it's just this one.
It's just what will be a one book
Yeah,
stack.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it'll go on the books that I'm book talking book stack, even though I'll be book talking that one with you, not
Not for your
not for
channel.
my books I love channel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not for my books I love playlist on the channel. That.
I think we get it.
Yeah.
So
Hey
before
everybody,
before we get into the book, how are you?
I am still mostly asleep. Let's be honest.
You just had a nap.
I had a nap. I'm so glad, but I actually had to set my alarm so that we could get set up and I could make sure that things were plugged in the way that they were supposed to be, which is good because the power cord doesn't plug into the microphone speaker spot or vice versa. And that would probably have damaged things that don't actually belong to me. And that would have been bad.
That would have been bad.
That would have been bad. So then we wouldn't have been here. But I had enough time to figure all that out. And I put on my necklace for my student. So I was like, because
Yes, that was made by a
yeah,
former student. Yeah.
yeah,
Really
yeah,
nice necklace too. You've shown me a close up of it. It's really nice.
so pretty. And I'm just. It's always there's a student I haven't had a chance to Mason Harris. I haven't had a chance to respond to her on Facebook, but she posted something like, say something like this, and I bet only two people will compliment you, or say why they care about you or something like that. And I'm like, I know why, but I am in a rush and I'm barely awake. But something about, I just, it's so nice to see that my students are doing well, like former
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
So, and it's a little disconcerting when they've got kids in middle school. That's, they can't have kids in middle school when they're 19. And like I go, there's another one, she and her friend, the couple of them have opened up a bakery, and I go and I get cookies from them
Yeah.
when I take cookies in. And like I have to, it's just this weird sort of dissociative experience. And
Hmm.
like I look at her, I'm like, I know that you've got to be in your late 20s, early 30s by now. I know you've got kids. Like I can look at your picture and say, I know, but like I can still see a 19-year-old young woman when I look at her, or when I look at her profile picture on Facebook, or pictures of her. I'm just like, it's just that's what, and it's with all of them. With guys, it's a little bit different because like sometimes the beard tends to be a little better at 30
Let's hope
at
so.
18.
Let's hope so. That's
Uh,
certainly the case for me. Let's hope it's the case for
yes,
others as
yes.
well. If for no other reason than
You
because you've
made
let
an
it.
effort. It was an effort was definitely made.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that, but I feel like it has definitely improved.
Well, some of that
Yeah.
is also just knowing how to care for it and things like that.
Yeah.
So, knowing how it fits your face best. You've had some time to sort of try different things out. Have you ever grown it out like, full?
I've grown it out a little bit more than it is now, but not significantly. because I
Okay.
just don't think that looks good. Like I don't want to have like a
I'm,
big
I'm trying.
bushy
I'm
like.
trying to picture you with like a
Yeah, I don't. I mean, that's like I remember there was a period in my life where my dad, because my dad is actually clean shaven now, but
Oh my goodness!
yeah, I know because you've
Wow,
never seen him clean shaven, right?
clean
Because
shaven?
he always
No.
had a beard when you saw him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but
like
yeah,
that's what I was thinking. He seems like he would look good with like a full,
yeah.
wearing plaid and
Oh, totally. He
yeah,
for a while he kept it like that. He kept, and well, in the winter he would grow it out because he would hunt and he would work outside a lot, and
yeah.
he had like a fuller beard. And yeah, I mean he looked good with it, but I just don't think that's not really my look. I'm good to keep it.
You're not the wearing plaid lumberjacky
No,
kind of
no,
guy.
I'm good.
Although
I like
you
having a
know, there-
beard. I like keeping it full, but I like keeping it trimmed. I don't like it to be too, you know, Grizzly Adams.
you're manscaped.
To a certain extent, yeah, at least above the neck.
Oh.
um, yeah.
And if anybody wants any evidence, there's Monday's video.
Well, that's true. Yeah, below the neck, it's not quite so
It's
manscaped.
more au naturel.
Radical Bacon in the chat says Steve has too many allergies for hunting. Yeah, especially this allergy I developed as a teenager. This really strong allergy to killing animals for no reason. That's probably the strongest
Clearly, it's
allergy.
not no reason. It's just no reason that you find acceptable.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's that's the strongest allergy I have that keeps me from hunting. The fact that I'm allergic to the senseless barbarism of hunting culture, which I detest. Yeah.
Lion says, I've been somebody else's beard. I
Interesting.
never have been publicly, but I recently had someone that I knew when I was younger who came out, and I was like, okay, so didn't know that.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. So liking the facial. I've often wondered what it would be like to have a beard. I like not having to deal with it. I mean, a lot of people are like, how do you deal with long hair? It's such. I'm like, you put it in a ponytail, and then like, I don't have my clips here, but like seriously, it's like 30 seconds, and it's like in a bun.
Yeah.
And so like, I can either have a low bun and look, sort of the kind of strict teacher, no nonsense type look. And I also part my hair beforehand, so like either left part or center part or whatever. And sometimes depending on how far you part it over, that changes the look. And then or I'll do a looser bun and have it high, and that gives it a more relaxed look. Or sometimes I'll just do a ponytail. But as long as it's off the face, I'm good. People are like, but short hair is so much less effort. I'm like, you have to get it trimmed like every 6
regularly
weeks.
Yeah.
And then you have to make an appointment, you have to talk to people. And I mean, I realize like getting your hair washed by somebody else, that feels nice. That's nice. It is luxuriant. But and then you actually
you're
have
weighing that against the hassle of
and it's not, I mean, if it's something you enjoy, it's not a hassle, but just like everything just takes so much time. And it's just like, it's just easier to just not.
Yeah.
It's just not like with this, all I have to do is, it'll get tangled. And then, while I'm here, I can just, just run a comb through the ends.
Problem
and then
solved.
It's not tangled anymore.
Yeah.
Ta-da! And then, it really doesn't take it much longer. It does take longer to dry, but I'm fine with getting it mostly dry and then going to bed with a wet head. So, and then it dries overnight. C'est la vie.
Because you've got it all figured out.
I guess. I mean, I just like, just lower your standards. Lower your standards.
Oh, life is so much easier.
It really is. Oh my goodness.
Shall we discuss the chapter?
Yeah, let's. Oh gosh, yeah.
The reason we have come together ostensibly to discuss.
Ostensibly, yeah. There was a purpose to this. I forgot about that, but
there's a very loose purpose But
Some random geek. That's like all I've got is split ends because literally, I haven't cut this in 10 years, and it only is down. I mean, if it kept growing and the ends weren't split, I'm sure it would be like it's been this length for I don't know 4 years. So it's because the ends I break them when I sit. Like if it gets down to where I'm sitting on it, I break them. That's how
yeah,
that's how it stays this length. Front ponytail, improvised beard. Yeah, but it's not the same as when it grows out of your face. That's just different.
yeah,
That's different. I've done the over the face ponytail. This is
yeah.
ha ha. I'm turned the other way. Ha ha ha. All right.
So, chapter 13.
Yeah, it's a really short
It's
chapter,
a very short chapter.
and it's the end.
Yeah, and
Um,
Le Guin is sort of it's a very character based chapter.
yeah.
It's a very meditative, sort of contemplative chapter. Like
There's some description because
yeah.
they're not there. He is in a new environment for him. He's on. This is a Hainish ship, I think.
He's on the ship. Yeah, the Hainish ship, the Davenant.
Yes,
That
and
is
there's
taking him
some
back.
Kieran crew members as well, but
Yeah.
no Orasti as far as I know.
No, well, because remember in the previous present day chapter,
Mhm.
he sort of seeks asylum at the Terran
Right.
embassy, and they agree um, to take him back home, to take him back
Yes.
to Anaris. So and that's where we find him here at the end of the book. He is on his way home, and it doesn't really address. I found it interesting because again, like I say, it's Le Guin has chosen to end the book um, to give it a feeling of closure, to give it a sense of closure and a sense of having come full circle. But she, in this final chapter, she doesn't tie up a lot of the loose ends that were left in the previous present day chapter, like quite intentionally. She doesn't even, because Shevik had talked to the Terran ambassador about, I want to broadcast my theory to everybody. And, I want, and we aren't like, that's not even mentioned. We can just sort of assume that it happened,
Yeah,
but it's
but that's
not
not
mentioned
the
at all.
point.
Yeah, exactly.
I
That's
mean,
not, she
the
doesn't
arrangement
choose
the
to.
arrangement has been made.
Yeah.
We don't really get to see that. There's not a whole lot of uh like resolution. It's like the falling action just finishes, and that's about it.
Yeah.
This is
Which
you
is
know
appropriate, which I think is very appropriate for a reason that if that I will definitely mention at the end if we don't get to it naturally through the discussion, because I think there is a very good reason why this last chapter is structured the way it is, and why it only shows us what it shows us instead of taking us a little further. But you're smart and you're a teacher, you'll probably get there before I do. But
Well, Garrett says the Dispossessed is the first book in a series, and I disagree. It's the first book in um a group of books that are interconnected, but I disagree that they're, and I don't think they're intended as a series either. Um yeah, and it's not that they don't they're not super sequential.
mhm.
They're they are, there is a chronology to them. It's the Hainish cycle it's usually referred to.
Yeah,
And I'm not entirely sure. I want to say there's five, but I'm obviously I'm not. I say I'm not entirely sure. Actually, I mean I'm not sure at all.
you're not
I would
sure
actually
at all.
I'm not really sure at all. So
But
um
yeah, so Shevik is he's aboard the ship, and it talks about how this ship is very different from the
mhm.
Mindful, which was the freighter that carried him to Ures initially, and that was, it was a functional ship, and if you remember how it was described in the first chapter, I mean, it wasn't. It seemed. I mean, obviously, it was way nicer and way more advanced than any spacecraft that we have here in the real world,
Well, yeah.
but it was, compared to the Davenant. I mean, the Davenant is described as being very large and very luxurious, very comfortable inside. It's designed for people to stay in it for a long time because
Right.
it's designed for interstellar journeys.
So of
Um,
course, I mean that made, having done Trek reluctantly. I mean, it definitely gives me some Star Trek vibes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And also it reminds me because, it, but it's still a sublight ship.
Yes, yes,
It
which
travels at
really
close to
fast.
the speed of light, which is super, super fast, but it doesn't travel faster than the speed of light. But because it travels close to the speed of light, people on board the ship experience, well, they don't actually consciously experience, but they experience
Yeah.
they experience time dilation, where
Yes.
time passes much differently for them on the ship than it does for people outside the
That
ship.
aren't. Yes.
Yeah. Which reminded me not so much of Star Trek, but of Carl Sagan's Cosmos, because that was the first place where I learned about that. I mean, it's a well established scientific principle, and Carl Sagan didn't invent it or discover it, but he was the person who taught me about it when I was a kid, and I watched Cosmos on
I learned
TV.
about it from the Cartoon Guide to Physics.
That's also a good source.
Yep.
But yeah, so it reminds one of that, and of, the idea that if you could build a ship that was capable of going very, very close to the speed of light, it would be possible for people to visit other star systems, at least the most nearby other star systems to us, within a human lifetime, for the people on the ship,
Right.
not for people on Earth.
Right.
We would be dead and gone by the time they got there and back. But for people on the ship, they could do it within a human lifetime. That's sort of the trade off of interstellar travel at less
Near
than
the
light
speed of
speed.
light.
Yeah, which is, you can do it, but only the astronauts get to
Yeah.
survive it. Those of us left home will not see them again.
Radical bacon. Yes, you should absolutely make your pizza.
You
100%
should
behind that.
always make your pizza. You should always make your
You
pizza.
say that, Steve. Are you making pizza tonight?
No, tonight is not pizza night for me, Dana.
See? Well,
Wednesday
you
is
said
pizza
you
night.
should always make pizza.
I
Always.
have, if you want to,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
if you want to, I am considering. You and I have discussed this. I know I'm still not making any promises, but I am considering making a homemade pizza for pizza night
Uh-huh.
on Wednesday. I
Because
I haven't totally decided yet, but I'm considering it because we talked about it last night. I found a recipe that seems intriguing. I might give it a shot, but I don't know.
you're not going to say what's intriguing about it?
It's what's intriguing. Well, okay, so here, let's pause the book discussion for a moment, because this requires some backstory, right? So you and I were talking, and you posed the question of, if you could only keep either bread or potatoes, which one would you keep? And I said, if I had to get rid of one and I could only keep one, I would probably choose to keep potatoes, for the reason that I think you could use potatoes to mimic bread in a lot of different situations. So you wouldn't miss bread as much as you would miss potatoes, because you could use potatoes to sort of,
Bread-like.
to do bread-like things. And you said, what about pizza? Which would be tough. But I said, I bet that you could create like a potato-based pizza crust. And then I looked up a recipe, and it turns out I had no idea. I was just pulling it out of my ass. And well, there must be some way to do a pizza crust with potatoes, right? And it turns out there is. And I found a recipe that looked good, and I'm going to try it at some point. I don't know if I'm going to try it on Wednesday, but I'm going to try it at some point, because the recipe actually did look pretty good. So we'll see. But
And I assume there's no meat in it, since it would be on a Wednesday.
Well, it would be, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put meat on it. No, I mean, you could put whatever toppings on it you wanted, but yeah, I would do a vegetarian version, yeah.
For Wednesday.
For Wednesday, yeah. So we'll see. One of these Wednesdays, I don't know if it'll be this Wednesday, but one of these Wednesdays, I'll do a homemade potato crust pizza and see.
A radical bacon greases me. Live streaming or cooking?
Live stream the cooking, yeah. Maybe. Actually, you know what? Because it turned out so well. I mean, I could have made a video of me making my my seitan chicken. Because I mean, like the making of it went really smoothly.
You say that now, and of course, if you try to like film it next time, it'll get all kinds of screwed up.
Exactly. But anyway, so let's get back.
It didn't work this way last time.
I swear to God, last time when nobody was watching, it went perfectly.
And of course that's what everybody wants to see,
Oh yeah.
is you suffering through.
They want to see you screw up because as the great stand-up comedian Stuart Lee has said, the greatest risk that a performer can take nowadays is to earnestly attempt to do something well.
Oh, I thought you were going to
So,
say that he was the one who said that misery is when you trip and fall. Comedy is when somebody else does.
oh no, that's Mel Brooks.
Oh, Mel
Yeah,
Brooks,
he
there we
says,
go.
and the actual quote is even better than that. He says, tragedy is when I stub my toe. Comedy is when you fall into a manhole and die.
And I think it's William Goldman who said that, that's the difference between Mel Brooks and James Bond, because James Bond, doesn't trip and fall. Mel Brooks is going to trip and fall in a bunch of, mud in a, mud puddle. And, when James Bond trips and falls, he falls into a pit of vipers.
Yes, that's the difference. Exactly.
That's the difference. It's how, and of course not into a manhole and die because, he's James Bond. So, all right. So back to
the book. So he's on the ship and he's on his way home. He's on his way home to Anaris.
The first mate of the Davenant, a Hainish man named Ketho.
Yes, that's right.
And they're speaking Eotic, and of course, Shevek doesn't speak any Hainish, which makes sense because he has only just learned about these people.
He hasn't even, he's never met them before, and Ketho is sort of knows enough Iotic to get by, but I think the book says he speaks it very formally because he isn't
very very correctly.
Yeah,
and Shevek says the landing is going to be exciting
because he's not entirely sure what's going to happen.
And I underlined that and put diplomatic.
Yeah.
And he said a lot of enemies and a lot of friends will be there. The good news is the friends, it seems there are more of them than when I left, and I underlined that and put yay.
Yeah.
So that's nice. It seems there are more of them.
It seems there are more. And because you have to figure, we've talked about this throughout the book. I'm not, except for some of the characters that we've actually gotten to know in the book. Like, I have not been terribly impressed by the Anaresti or their society or, their philosophy or their principles. But you have to figure the guy, like whatever you might have thought of Shevek leaving, the planet to go to Uris, if you thought it was a bad idea or whatever, like you got to give it up to the guy. Like, he did it.
Yeah.
He wasn't just mouth it off and say, somebody should go to the other planet. Like, he actually did it.
Made up.
Bed Up was like, somebody should, and Shevek was like, I'm going to go. And he went.
So somebody should go. It's not, he was very clear. It's not going to be me.
Yeah,
somebody should go, not me. He was at least very honest about it.
He was very upfront that he was not volunteering.
Nope.
He's like, no, this is my idea. Totally not going. Not going. Yeah. So, you got to give it up for the guy. So it makes sense that, that he would have, that at least a few more people would be on his side by the time he got back.
Because he did the thing.
That's true. And not only did he go, but presumably, his theory has been released by this point.
He said he had it, so
yeah,
I guess.
So they can give him props for that too.
Yep. See, gentlemen, it's okay if the omelet's falling apart. You're gonna have to cut it into pieces to eat it anyhow.
Yeah.
So it's okay. It's okay. It can still be tasty.
I'm sure it'll be delicious. Yeah. Just put it back together like Julia Child did that one time.
We'll never tell. It's there, I guess, for everybody to see in the live chat that's streaming along with this. But that's on you, man. That's on you.
Yeah, you chose to share that with us.
And thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
I'm glad that we have fostered an environment of trust.
See, and that's a life lesson. There's so much more that's important as opposed to appearances. Speaking of which, segue, we get a nice description of the Hanishmen, which also, I love the way that her visual description of the different types of people helps us understand the other types of people. Oh, sort of. Like, when they talked about the Terrans being nearly hairless, I was like, so like when they talk about the rest of them shaving, like, do they all have like hair? Are they all like really hairy
Are they
everywhere?
furry? Yeah.
Are they furry? I still haven't quite figured that out, but we see he is tall and I underline light skinned like a Cetian, but nearly hairless like a Terran, which I did not underline. So does that mean that like Shevik and the Honoresti and the Arasti and the Hainish, like they're lighter than we are? Are they
Are they pale?
like light? Like, I mean, because I guess there's a fair amount of difference there, but I mean, not a whole lot for me. Like, and then that brings into question, and I guess it's a matter of perception, just what counts as dark skinned, like,
Right.
because he hasn't met that many Terrans either. You know, there just haven't been that many. So yeah, exactly, Garrett. The implication is that they're hairier than baseline humans. Well,
Yeah.
I'm pretty fluffy. It's hard to see here because I mean my body hair is, I mean, this is actually darker than my body hair. My body hair is really pale. And then, more so on the lower legs. But, and then I don't have like a whole lot of hair on my, torso. You've got like if you look really close at my, my hands, it's got really short, really fine hair. And the implication, I guess, is that they've got more of that. They're just like fluffy, they're all
fuzzy
over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm just, and it's just this, she does this a lot. And it's just, I've always liked it. It's, just these tangential references to what things look like or the sensory detail. It's there, but it's
indirect.
Just enough to make you curious.
Yeah. It's describing things by describing how other things are different. Not necessarily saying, oh, the Anarasti are hairy as shit. Saying like, oh, these people are not as hairy as they are.
Yeah, I know, but like Emerald, my face is fuzzy. Like I've got peach fuzz. I mean, everybody, I do. Everybody does.
I know.
So, I mean, presumably there's more than that. And it makes, they talk about shaving their heads. Does that mean like
their entire, like,
I don't know. And I'm very curious. And like, because like ears would be like, I mean, do they have tufty ears? And how do you manage that? Like, I would think like if they would have ear tufts. I don't know. I don't know. You could really imagine all kinds of different stuff.
Yeah. A character designer for a movie would have a ball. Be like,
or they'd be just like, or depending on how cooperative / encouraging the production designer and whoever was in over them was. It'd be like, no, that's not quite right. Try it again. So I am pretty much Central European. I used to think, because my family comes from my dad's side of the family comes from Lancaster County. I used to think, and my mom's side of the family is German. I used to think that I was mostly German, but my dad's side of the family, because Lancaster County is like Amish country.
Pennsylvania Dutch, yeah.
Pennsylvania Dutch. And apparently we're not. We're not Amish. We're Mennonite for one thing, and we're Swiss, which kind of explains the height as well. So
you're from a family of Swiss giants.
But yeah, no mustache. Although I do have, I have for the past, I don't know, 5-10 years, I will have like two, one right there and one right there. Like I have these two little whiskers that come in, and those suckers are like, I mean, freaking tree trunks. They're thick, just like thick, very, very strong, like hair strand. I'm like, okay, calm down, dude.
I see you. So, Jesus.
Braid the nostril hair. I don't really have to worry about that too much. I think mostly because I'm really like, I'm really not athletic. What's enthusiastic about, when my nose gets stuffy at all, just, man, I got to blow my nose. And I'm really enthusiastic about that. And sometimes there's hair. And so it goes away.
You rip it out blow your nose so hard, you rip it out by the roots.
Well, not so much, but you blow your nose and then like, there's still like a little bit in there. So then, you throw that one away and then you get more tissue and you make sure you
clean it out. Yeah, of course. No, I get it.
The nose hairs, I mean, it's just, it's part of the cleansing experience. I don't know. Maybe I just like it, small amounts of pain. I don't know. You're Irish and German and a lightweight. Depends on how you mean a lightweight, because in some ways the Irish and Germans supposedly are not. So anyway, so Ketho is says, and Ketho says that he's going to be handling the landing craft, because also this is they're going to be taking like a shuttle, because they also make the point that this is not a ship that travels through atmosphere. Right.
This is just a spaceship.
And so Ketho's going to be handling the shuttlecraft, and Shevik's like, well, great. Not everybody would be cool with that. And Ketho is very not discreet, but sort of gentle in how he sort of edges stories. He's like, there are more maybe than you would think would be interested. Yeah. He's like, wait, you mean you want to come visit? And
yeah,
like, yes, I would. It's like, would your commander be okay with that? And he says, yes, that is actually part of my duty. But given, how things were seen to be among your culture, it was we discussed it with our ambassadors. Their feeling was that, quote, no formal request should be made. Mm-hmm. Love the use of the passive voice there. And so I'm not requesting this officially, but I'm just, since you asked, I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Like in Treasure Planet. He's like, are you saying that because it's the right thing or because you want to go? And Dr. Doppler says, I really, really, really want to go. And it's the right thing. So,
well, and you mentioned Star Trek earlier. This is totally a Star Trek. Like this really reminded me of Star Trek, because
the explore new societies and civilizations.
He's saying it's part of his mission to basically explore strange new worlds. But also it's a little bit of something that sounds kind of like the Prime Directive, like, I want to visit and investigate your world, but only if you're okay with it.
Yeah.
Which, to be honest, most Star Trek heroes don't actually practice. Like, they just kind of show up, but in theory, they're supposed to, practice non-interference. And Ketho is doing that. He's saying, yes, it's part of my mission to visit unexplored planets by us.
Yeah.
And if you,
and Emery Lyon says the Dispossessed is an episode of Star Trek from the point of view of the Hainish.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Hainish, their level of advancement seems to be analogous to, the level of advancement of like the Federation and the other warp capable species in Star Trek. Yeah.
So, and Shevik's like, huh. He says, well, I mean, you're not, we don't let Arasti in, so you're not Arasti. So, and he's, and Ketho says, yeah, we considered that, but, when Anaris was settled, you didn't know about anybody else. So essentially it was like, Honoresti and like everybody else, the official decision was that the terms included any foreigners. And he Shevik acknowledges that and said, yeah, our manager are the people are our managers.
Yeah. Sounds like a hierarchy to me, Dana.
Well, and he's acknowledging, he has acknowledged, the need to push back, to, like he says later, to act like an anarchist, that, people can get comfortable with the way that things are, and hierarchy can be formed just out of tradition and habit. You can become habituated to a certain way, and it's not necessarily, it may have, even if it was the best way at the time, as situations change and different people come into existence, or, the environment changes or the culture changes, it may not be the best way anymore, but because it's what we're used to, we don't want to change that, because we know what we know. And something new might be worse. It might be better, but it might be worse. He says, that's what our managers decided as well when your people tried to talk to us. But I think, Shevik says, I think they were wrong. They were just building more walls. And we know how he feels about those.
He doesn't like those.
And then Ketho, he says, I want to see it. Even before you came to Eris, I was curious about Anaris. It began when I read Odo's works. I became very interested. So, and he doesn't, he's not fluent in Eotic, which is what Odo's work would have been originally in.
Right, because Odo was
because
from
she was
Urus.
she was an Urasti. And so he may have learned Eotic so that he could read that, or possibly her works have been translated.
Yeah.
So, and he says, I've learned a little Pravic, not much yet. And my note is, bless his heart. I just really like Ket, though. He's so like sort of gently, shyly hopeful. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you think I could come with you?
Please? I really, really wanna. I wanna come explore. It's not. It's my duty.
I won't hurt nothing.
I'll be good. Mostly. I'll be
mostly.
I know.
I'll be good mostly.
I'll be anarchistic.
I'll be anarchistic. I promise I won't do nothing nobody tells me. Yeah, but and Shevik is responsible here. He doesn't just say, yes, welcome, fellow anarchist, come with me. Like, he says, okay, are you sure about this? It could be dangerous. Not everybody is going to be happy to see you.
I really don't know exactly what to tell you to expect, because I don't know. I don't really know what to expect myself.
Right. Which, as you mentioned before, Shevik says was part of the reason that he did this, is he did want to kind of shake things up and to introduce a little of the unexpected, back into his society, because he felt that it had become too stodgy and too sort of clinging to custom and stuff like that he wanted to change things up. But he was also realistic.
Today, by the way.
What word?
Stagnant. Yes, because the poem that I modeled for my students was the skeleton in armor. And it's at the end, still as a stagnant fen. So
interesting.
Yes.
And Garrett, I don't actually believe that anarchism just means not doing what people tell you. I was kidding, but that was. Although you are correct, I do get most of my knowledge about anarchism from Rage Against the Machine lyrics,
and from the Dispossessed,
and now from the Dispossessed, yes,
and from Random Geek and me yelling at him.
Yeah, exactly. From your sometimes fraught interactions, I'm just like,
Steve, you should be an anarchist.
I disagree.
I know you do, but you're wrong. It's okay. It's okay for you to be wrong, Steve.
Well, I'm glad that you think so, because you think I'm wrong a lot.
I do. And yet we're still friends. Imagine that. Because I'm okay with you being wrong.
Yep, that's really the secret to the whole thing.
For our friendship.
That's what makes the whole thing work.
Okay. He says, once you're there, he doesn't say there's no going back. He says, but we become responsible to you and you to us. You become an honoresti with the same options everybody else got, but they are not safe options. Freedom is never very safe. And I like the very in there, it's not that freedom is never safe.
It can be a little safe.
It's never very safe. It's always, a little bit, and that's, the whole, freedom versus order that you get in a lot of science fiction, a lot of dystopian literature. It's about, the imposition of order and going too far in that direction. And it's very difficult to find a good story that explores the in-between, like before a dystopia really becomes a dystopia. Mm-hmm. That the in-between period of where there's there's traditions that are constraining, but it's not dystopia. Which of course doesn't really make for a good story in most cases.
Right.
So, but it's at the same time, I think it would be interesting to explore. he tells Ketho, you would find yourself very much alone. And he says, Ketho says, my race is very old. You know, we've tried everything. We've tried anarchism, but I haven't.
Right. You get the impression that if the Hainish anarchist phase was a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or I mean, and you know, it was probably because they're such an old race and they seem like they're pretty spread out. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it was probably more of a case where there, you know, the entire Hainish civilization didn't go anarchist, but maybe there was like a segment of it or a section of it that was anarchistic for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Ketho said he has read he's read the work of Odo, and he's like, I want to see what this is like.
Yeah. And he said, if each life is not, I underline this, if each life is not new, each single life, then why are we born? So I liked that. And Shevik says in Pravik, we are the children of time. And Ketho looks at him and he's kind of thinking about it. Because again, remember, he doesn't speak a whole lot of Pravik.
Yeah.
And then he says it in Yaudik, we are the children of time. And he's like, all right.
You got it.
He calls him Amar. So yeah, it's just so sweet. And he's like, you know, I said that I had nothing to give in return for, you know, what her people and yours have done for me. Maybe I can give you something in return, an idea, a promise, a risk. It's just, oh, so he's made a friend. They're, you know, kind of connecting there.
Yeah.
And they're looking out, looking at Anaris and thinking he's thinking he talked to Bidap and about Tokfur and whether it would be okay for Tokfur to come to the port, you know, it being as unsafe as it's likely to be. And Bidap had said, you don't think I could stop her even if it wasn't?
Right. Like, if she wants to come, she's going to come.
Tokfur going to do what Tokfur going to do.
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness. And he says, you know, are you sure about this? You know, I am coming home, but you are leaving home.
Yeah.
And so, and he says, well, how soon are we getting in the line of captains? 20 minutes. And he says, well, I'm ready. I don't have anything to pack. And that's kind of how it ends.
Yeah.
With a nice line. His hands were empty, as they had always been.
Yep.
So
end of book.
It's nice.
It's a nice final line. But I think the image of Shevik's empty hands, I mean, that's the image that she chose to close the book on, and it's a fine image. But I think there is a more appropriate image that is evoked by this chapter. Although, as you were saying about how the you know, the way she describes things by describing them sort of indirectly or sort of hinting at things.
Mm-hmm.
This image, I think, is evoked by this chapter in a very indirect way, but in a really sort of satisfying and beautiful and artful way. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
I'm guessing when they're looking at Anaris.
No, not exactly.
Oh, okay.
Well, okay.
No, that's what I thought you were going for. That's what I thought you would.
I mean, that is, well, that the descriptions of Anaris, like out the window at the various stages of the journey, are really nice too. Like the way she sort of when they're really close, and it's like we're landing in 20 minutes, so like they're there, and there's the description of Anaris out the window being just like a curve that sort of fills the window because they're right there. You know, it's no longer like in the distance; they're right there, and that's a nice image, and you can picture it, you know.
So what would you pick?
Well, do you remember the thought experiment that started young Shevik on his interest in physics, the rock thrown at the tree?
Yes. Okay, I thought you were talking about something that was in the chapter.
Well, no, yeah, no, well, it's in the chapter, but it's in the chapter in the sense that Shevik's position, like in the narrative,
Yeah.
as we leave him in the chapter, he is still he is the
He has
rock.
not actually closed the gap.
Yeah, he has not actually reached the tree yet.
Yes.
And I think it's wonderful that Le Guin chooses to leave him in that state where
Yes.
we know he's going, the rock is headed
He's
toward
gonna
the
hit the
tree.
tree.
We know the rock is going to hit the tree at some point very soon, but we don't get to see it hit the tree. The story ends before the rock hits the tree. We see Shevik preparing to leave, but we don't get the full closure. We don't get the
Yeah.
full resolution. And that is one of my favorite storytelling techniques.
Yeah.
I absolutely, because it's always struck me as a really, really artful way to tell a story, to lead us right up to the point where we want to go. Because by this point, I mean, regardless of how I may feel about anarchism and the viability of it as a way to build a society, I like Shevik. I'm invested in him as a character. I want him to be okay. I want him to go home because that's where he wants to go. And so that's what I want. I want Shevik to go home and to be reunited with his friends and his family, right? And Le Guin doesn't give me that. She lets me know that that's where it's heading,
Yeah. But
but she doesn't give
she
me
doesn't
that.
she doesn't give it she doesn't do it for you. She
Right.
lets you do it. And again, we talk about when I do my lesson on beginnings, I talk about, the way that a good beginning requires the reader or invites the reader or entices the reader to put an investment in, to make predictions and make guesses, which then creates that investment that draws them in further so that they can find out if their predictions are correct, or if what they think is going to happen plays out the way that it might. It creates the sense of wanting to know what happens next.
Right.
And
Yes.
but that creating that sense of investment isn't something that a good writer does just at the beginning. As Le Guin's showing us here, it's something that a good writer does at the end, because
Yes.
again, and like I was talking about in my modeling with Billy Collins and the poem Introduction to Poetry, that he isn't saying that a poem that the text doesn't matter. It's about the interaction between the audience and the text. The idea of, I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. The author is still the one who has created the poem. The author's, intent is not negligible. That's not quite what I want, but, is immaterial once it becomes about the reader or listener and the poem. Once it becomes about the audience and the poem, but the audience still should be connected to the poem, and that connection is that experience is what creates that investment.
Yeah.
There's engagement there, and that's what Le Guin is doing here by not just saying, here's what happens to Shevik, ta-da. It makes, if you're going to get that, you have to sort of think it through for yourself. And that's what she invites you to do. And that's, it creates further engagement. It creates more of a connection because you're doing more of the work yourself. That's an investment of your creative process. And it makes it more your experience, because
Absolutely.
you think, and the same thing with her descriptions that are sort of tangential and make you wonder, exactly how does that play out? You're using your creativity to fill in the gaps that she deliberately leaves for you there.
Yeah. And it's so much more satisfying as a reader when the writer allows you to do that, when the writer allows you to sort of create your own closure like that,
Mm-hmm.
and
It takes,
yeah.
I mean, it requires incredible confidence.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, let's be honest, it requires incredible skill too. So you don't leave the reader just going, wait, huh? So like, is he gonna get there, or are they gonna shoot him down? Like you don't question that. You're not left with the thought that he's gonna be
No, it's
shot
not
down.
suspenseful. No, it's not suspenseful in that sense. You're left with the impression that he's going to make it.
Yes.
You just don't get to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Radical Bacon is asking about spelling. In my book, it's the way Garrett has it. When
Yeah,
I
mine
first
too.
listened to it, I wasn't sure if it was a K at the end or a G. Honestly, I wasn't sure if it was
Oh,
Shevik or Shevik.
Shevig. Yeah, no, it's yeah. In my, it's what Garrett says. Shevek.
So
Um, but yeah, but you know, in a there's another way in which that kind of an ending works too, and that is, if very simply, it's bittersweet because we want to see him land and we don't get to see it. You know, and but because we're invested in it, and because by this point the book, you know, sort of has us, and we're hanging on her every word, it doesn't feel disappointing. It doesn't feel like a cheat that we're not being shown the last leg of the journey. Like it
yeah, I
feels,
don't
it
I
feels
don't know. I'm
appropriate.
not. I think Shevik's. I'm not. I was not feeling like I wanted to see that. You know, I know that it's going to happen. I've seen enough of Shevik and Tokver and Pillin that
Mm-hmm.
I don't miss it. You know, I'm not, you know, I don't, and yeah, it doesn't feel like a cheat, but until you said, you know, we want to this, I was like, oh, that it literally didn't occur to me. I'm like,
Well, I guess
his confidence and like, you know, that was enough for me.
I mean, I agree with you. Like, I don't, it's two things at once for me. It's emotionally, I feel like I want to know that Shevik makes it and is okay. But at the same time, like, I totally agree with the creative decision. Like, I think the what makes the ending work is the fact that it leaves us before he makes it all the way.
Yes.
And you know, even if it didn't have the added symbolism of, you know, the rock thrown at the tree and that's what Shevik is at the end, like, I mean, I think that's just another layer to it that makes it work even better. But even if that wasn't present in the book, like, that kind of an ending
Yeah.
is beautiful
And
to me
it's
when it's
because
done well.
it's not, you know, a deliberately ambiguous ending, which
No.
often does feel like a cheat.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you know, you know, we know how this is. We don't have to have um the nice neat bow at the end. You know, you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to have the everybody says, "Oh, Shevik, we're so glad you're back." And the other, you know, and yet he found out that there were more of his friends than there were enemies after all.
Right.
Yay.
Yeah.
It
That's
would
cheap.
feel, yeah,
That's cheap.
it would feel tacked on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this,
There.
I mean, and there, I'm sure, you know, Le Guin is, was, I guess,
Mhm.
skilled enough as a writer that she could have ended it before it got to the point of feeling tacked on, like where it would feel just like closed. But here, it just sort of leaves you feeling, going into poetry again, Taylor Molly's ending of I Could Be a Poet, ending softly, hauntingly simple, as though there is more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just
And it's like, ah, I see what you did there. Yeah, exactly.
but without feeling remotely as tongue-in-cheek as that poem
Yeah.
does. So
I want to also mention, because I think the reason that I love endings like this so much.
Charles Chapman.
Yeah, no, exactly.
We were
Boy,
all thinking of Charles.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Hey, pick an ending. I'll help you. The ending where they all bow down to the hobbits. That's the ending of the fucking movie. Skip every other ending. Just end it there. I don't care what happens after that. That's the end of the story. I don't care what, I don't give a fuck what happens to Sam or Frodo going to the fucking Southlands or wherever the fuck he goes. I don't give a shit. The movies, you don't have to show me every moment of a character's life until they die for the story to be over. The story's over there. But anyway,
no, really, Steve, how do you feel?
can I tell you? You and I have talked about this, or I don't think, and I talked about it in our podcast when me and Jason reviewed it.
Yeah.
The first two Lord of the Rings movies, I acknowledge that they're definitely not for me, but they are impressive in a lot of ways, and like I can sort of appreciate them in terms of like, just the amount of work that went into them, and some of the cinematography and right. But like,
you go and then you're like, gotta dial it back.
but well, no, but like Return of the King, I honestly think is a bad movie. Like I'm not willing to say that Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers are bad movies. I just think they're just not for me. Like
Okay.
it's just not my bag. I'm not interested in it. I don't really enjoy them, but I can't say they're bad movies. I think Return of the King is flat out a bad movie, and I do not understand like
I think I
why.
do.
Yeah,
I think I do. Garrett says of all the parts of the books to be faithfully adapted, they chose the ridiculously long ending.
yeah.
But I think also, I think by
I'm not. And
that
Cardinal
point,
Doomsday. I'm not talking about the book. I'm talking about the movies. I haven't read any of the books. I'm talking
no, no,
just
no,
about the
no,
movies.
no, yeah, oh yeah, no, I think part of it also was that I feel like there's a sense that this is it. This is all we get to do, and so there's more of a we can't leave out, and also they'd already by that point had, I mean, did they come out one right after the, like, did they shoot all of them before releasing any of them?
I think they were still. I don't think they shot all of it, and then but they shot them like like one after the other, and and then the
But I
movies
felt like
they
they
came
were,
out one. I mean, they came out 3 years in a row. I mean,
yeah.
it wasn't. Yeah,
But I feel like, some of the flack from what got from things being left out in the first one may have influenced that decision later on. But, and also the sense of it being this epic project that's coming to an end, and at the same time being like, but we've done, but we can't, we also have to, I think that plays up more, especially on a project of that scale, that it's tempting to leave all that stuff in as you get toward the end, and that, like, that's
yeah,
it, so
yeah.
it's more of giving into temptation. I think
Well,
that's
and the I noticed, and again, I never read the Harry Potter books either, but I got the impression that something similar happened with the last two Harry Potter movies, actually, because they decided to split the final book into two movies.
mhm.
There were entire sections of those last two movies when I watched them when I thought this is stuff that would have been cut out if this was one
Yeah,
movie, and
yeah, exactly.
should have been, because
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
should have been one movie, not two, and all this stuff is stuff that they should have cut out, and it's only there
Yeah,
because
but the thing is, honestly, you could say
it
the same thing. The book is like one book, but it's like one book. Like, it's like if you wanted to commit a murder, that would be the book that you would use to brain somebody with.
and Garrett points out, you asked about if how they shot the movies. Garrett says they actually they completed principal photography for all three before the first film was released,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then
So
they
that
did
was,
they
yeah,
did
I
reshoots
was
and stuff
really thinking it
afterwards.
was more about the sense of, well, this is it. This is the end, that it's Tempe. So, and some random geek, you're really good with finding links to YouTube. Taylor Molly's performance of I Could Be a Poet is hilarious. I don't know if I think I've seen Billy Collins read Introduction to Poetry, but the poem itself stands pretty well. Um, Taylor Molly's I Could Be a Poet, if you read it, is good, but he's very, he's very much a performer, and his performances of his poems are just, they're so much fun.
Yeah.
So
But I also wanted to before I got off on my Lord of the Rings tangent. Thanks whoever mentioned that randomly in the chat and set me off. But I wanted to mention
catharsis, Steve, catharsis.
I wanted to mention a to my mind a far 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 better film than any of the Lord of the Rings movies. Chaplin's City Lights,
I know is a favorite of yours.
which is one of my, it's like top two or three. Like I absolutely love it. It's not
I think it's top three. I don't think it's
yeah,
one of your top two.
maybe
Aren't
top three. Top three, yeah.
I think your
Um,
your first two are both Buster Keaton's.
you know me so well.
Well, I mean,
My top
time.
my top one is a Buster Keaton. My second one fluctuates. It depends, but
Okay, depending on your mood.
depending on my mood, exactly. And also, like, ranking them has become far less important to me as I have grown up, and I'm like, who cares what's like
As
number
you've
three and number
matured.
four? Yeah, like what's the, like, who cares? But City Lights is way up there, and it's one of those rare movies that is both absolutely hysterical and also just incredibly, just wrenchingly beautiful. Like it's a really, really beautiful movie. And the ending of City Lights, and I'm not spoiling it because it's not like a surprise or anything. I mean, you've never seen it, right?
Nope.
I do want to watch it with you at some point, but talking about the ending is not like spoiling it or anything
Is
because
it on the list?
it's on the list.
Okay,
Oh,
okay,
it's on the
fine.
list, baby. Um, but
Neat.
so the end of City Lights is Chaplin's character, the tramp, or the little fellow, as he is described in credits, has fallen in love with a blind girl. And through a series of contrivances and effort on his part, he raises money for her to get a surgery so she can get her sight, right? And so she knows the tramp, but she doesn't know that he is homeless, and she thinks that he's rich. And he has allowed her to sort of believe this. And then she gets her surgery and gets her sight back, and he doesn't see her for a while. And then he sort of randomly runs into her, like a long time later on the street. And this is the first time they've seen each other for a while. And so she sees him and she takes pity on him. She doesn't know that he's the person that she knew, the person that helped her. But eventually, through their interaction, I think he says something like he mentions the fact that she used to be blind, and he says, you can see now. And there's something about the way he is with her that it clicks, and she realizes that this guy in the tattered clothes and this obviously not a rich guy is the guy that she knew. And she looks at him, and she says, "It's you." And then it cuts to a close up of Chaplin just sort of looking at her and kind of chewing on his fingers nervously and sort of smiling, but kind of smiling like in nervous anticipation. Um, and that's the end of the movie. It fades to black and it's the end. And I read a review of it that talks about why that's one of the greatest endings in the history of the movies. And they say because when you watch it, it leaves you with a question. And the question is, what happens next? And that's kind of the same question that you're left with at the end of The Dispossessed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what you hope happens. You hope that Shevik lands and that everybody welcomes him home and that everything is peaceful and and that
I think there's more setup. And again, this is just based on what you just said. I think there's
please.
more setup for what happens next with Shevik and in the Dispossessed and well after the Dispossessed, um, than what you described for City Lights.
Oh, I agree.
Because
City Lights is you're left with the feeling that it could go either way.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
I agree.
Um,
But it's
and of
that
course,
same note of
yeah,
uncertainty.
yeah. Are you familiar with Cyrano de Bergerac?
Uh,
Like the
I,
basic
I've
framework of the story.
I'm familiar with the basic frame. Oh, it's the same. It's isn't it the sort of the same thing? Like what's her name? Is it Roxanne?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the female character's name. And was that Steve
that
Martin?
was the Steve Martin, the modern
Yes,
day version.
that's a modern day version of it.
Because
And I don't
he's like feeding her lover the lines,
right.
and he's in love with her, but she doesn't know that it's like his words that have been wooing her. That's kind of the
Right. Yeah, and it's like through letters.
yeah.
And I haven't seen Roxanne, so I don't know how it ends, but there's it closes things off much more definitively. And I've always felt that it goes further than it needs to, despite the fact that, I'm just like some English teacher and this is like a literary classic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. No spoilers, I guess, despite the fact that I don't know how many centuries this has been out.
It's pretty old.
Pretty old. And it's in French, so like who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then there's also like the opposite of that in terms of movies. I've always thought is like the ending of Psycho, where like they have instead of leaving you with like a note of ambiguity or a note of
Anticipation.
non-resolution anticipation, yeah, sort of leaving you as a clenched fist. There's like a scene where you have like a psychiatrist explaining what's wrong with Norman. And it's like, Do we really need that? Like,
Somebody thought so.
somebody thought so, but it's like, do we? Okay, I guess we need to explain. We need to diagnose him before the movie can end. I don't see why, but okay. It kind of takes the wind out of the sails a little bit.
Cardinal Doomsday, I'm vaguely familiar with that. Like I can hear him saying "Mahwait Plume," but I'm not. And of course, he was wonderful. Oh God, he was wonderful in Last Holiday. I've never been.
Oh yeah, he was the chef. Yeah,
he was the chef, and I really liked him in it's The Man in the Iron Mask.
I believe so.
Where he is brain fart.
One of the Musketeers.
He's Porthos.
Okay.
He's Porthos. Yeah. He is so great in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also Cardinal Doomsday mentions, and you're right, Cardinal Doomsday, it is the Nth Degree. That's the episode you're trying to think of. The episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where we see Barclay playing Cyrano in one of Beverly's plays on the ship. And that is such a great scene because it's a great acting bit for Dwight Schultz because he is playing Barclay playing Cyrano, and Barclay is not doing a good job, but he is really trying. And there's something so poignant about that scene where he's acting in this really serious, like, emotional scene in the play, as Cyrano, as Barclay, doing a bad job, but trying really hard to do a good job and just sort of wearing his heart on his sleeve, as he does it. And it's so good. Like, it's such a great scene.
I did not know that Gerard Depardieu was a terrible person. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, neither did I. Oh, well.
Well, David C. Drake, I anticipate that I will not be here for the end of the actual universe. Might be here for the end of the world, depending on how things go. But
depending on what happens in the next few years.
Or, several, potentially.
Yeah,
who knows? God knows, as I like to say. Well, it was a short chapter. And
it was. And we have, well, I mean, do you want to talk some sort of closing thoughts on the book before we wrap up?
I really liked it, you guys. I liked the book. I like Shevik. I don't know. I don't think he would be the sort of person that you would really enjoy being friends with.
No, yeah.
He's kind of like really like he's super into science and very thinky. Although he does seem like the sort of person that you could just be like quiet around. He could do his thing. He could do his math over there, and I could like sit over here and read my book.
Yeah.
Your promised thoughts. Please repeat your promised thoughts, gentlemen, because I apparently missed them. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book even more this time around, and I'm so glad you read it with me. Thank you, Steve.
Oh, well, you don't have to thank me. I had a great time reading it and talking about it with you. Speaking of like saying that Shevik isn't the kind of person you necessarily want to hang out with and have a conversation with, Badap totally is. I would hang out with Badap, because Badap is sort of like Shevik is my favorite character because Shevik is the protagonist, and as we've talked about before, I generally, if I have a favorite character in a story, it's usually the protagonist. That's just the way I approach stories, and that's just the way my brain works. But other than Shevik, Badap is definitely my favorite character. I think, because for someone like me who is, to put it charitably, extremely skeptical of the viability of anarchism, Badap, who is still an anarchist and is not like completely against his society, but he is sort of the voice of the problems that Anarestes society has. He's the one who sort of points out the hypocrisies and points out the inconsistencies. He's the character who notices the things about Anarestes society that I noticed as a reader. And he's the one who actually speaks those out loud and says, hey, wait a minute, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that from Le Guin as well, because as the writer, like, she didn't need to have a character like that. She could have made the book more of a polemic, and she didn't.
But she's good. She knows what she's doing. She's a writer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And she's a great writer. And that's the other thing that I take from the book that made me really, really appreciate it, which is she is such a goddamn beautiful writer. I mean, her use of language is just exquisite. I mean, that's one of the reasons why despite how problematic he is in a lot of ways, it's one of the reasons why I cherish the writing of F. Scott Fitzgerald so much, because just as a wordsmith, as a stylist, his writing is just so beautiful, and Le Guin is the same way. It's like the way she sets a scene, the way she describes things, the images that she chooses to emphasize, and the way she describes them and sort of puts them in our minds. It's she's just an exquisite writer. She's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I do want to go back to what Gentleman said. He was
Yes.
going to social negotiations are not something all people flourish in. And so I put forth that having a sort of code of conduct, explicit guidelines would be beneficial and be somewhat statist. The social assumptions should be written down somewhere because consent requires explicit communication. And I think they do kind of start with that because they have, Odo's principles that guide them.
Mm-hmm.
So they do have some of that, but again, those are they're more like guidelines are, and I having worked with students with disabilities, and who have various types of supports given their disabilities, and also given what structures have been put in place through the educational system and parental consent and things like that. You talk about the common talent of communication. I try to stay away from talking about talent at all with my students, because by the time they get to me, they're in high school. And, talent has been overshadowed by skill, by the developed, practice and development. It's very, in very few cases is it about what's innate. And those cases tend to be very extreme. For example, like I tested, and a lot of my students, given that, I teach honors classes, a lot of my students have tested and been identified as gifted. And I mean, I recognize the traits in me that fit in what is defined as gifted, but I mean, I can interact. I don't have a problem interacting with normal society. Sometimes it's
Right.
exhausting, and sometimes I am aware of ways in which I don't perceive things the same way that others do. And I have to plan for, this is, the way that I'm going to react to this is not the way that most people are going to react. And I need to be ready for that. But it's not outside the realm of human experience by any stretch of the imagination. And if I didn't have documentation, it would be very difficult for me to say this student has innate abilities that that are a higher level of talent, whereas this student has worked, has been supported at home and has had additional opportunities to develop their skills in communication. I also think that a socialist, anarchistic society has, they talk about, the sense of brotherhood, that each person belongs not only to themselves, but to everyone else, that there's this shared sense of community. That shared sense of community means that communication's not a one-way street. It's really not. It's up to the person. Yes, you do need to, approach others and communicate with them, but at the same time, the people that you're communicating with have the responsibility to make sure that they are making things as clear as they can, that they are being as honest and as forthright as they can be, while still being respectful of themselves and their boundaries and others. And there's also the the responsibility to make sure that you understand what other people are trying to get across, realizing that there are limits to what we can accomplish with language. So, I mean, communication, I mean, if one person, it's not just about one person. It's always about a group. Cardinal Doomsday, what I would say is what I learned when I was working as a sort of, clerk for a chiropractor, and that is, quote unquote, within normal limits. And that means that, there's a range of behaviors that, you've got, your sort of bell curve type thing, that there are more people who sort of cluster in one area that is more common, but that doesn't mean that that's the only common experience. And then you have your outliers, and there are fewer of them towards the end. Mm-hmm. And you can recognize sort of, how close and in what ways you have behaviors and patterns that are more common, and in what ways you have behaviors and patterns that are less common. I don't think that's, too difficult to find out. I kind of went on there, and there were people saying things, and I was trying to figure out how to put that. Yeah, John, I'm English teacher, so precision is very important to me. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I talk about that with my students because it's one of the reasons I love teaching sophomores, because they're right at that intersection. And we've had a lot of those discussions this semester. Not always with the students, sometimes with the parents or with the administrators, and it hasn't always gone the way that I think it should go. But I've talked with them about, the importance of developing your understanding of yourself and what your values are and what you want your priorities to be and why, and realizing that your values and priorities may not be and are not going to be the same as the values and priorities of those who are around you and those who care about you. And navigating that, saying, look, I know this is what you want for me, and this is, what you expect of me, but here's what's important to me. Navigating that, it's an important part of being a part of a society. And it's hard, and it's going to continue being hard, but the more you practice it, the better it gets. And for a lot of them, navigating the fact that, they're not just getting A's is an opportunity for them to practice those conversations with people who care about them. Yeah. But students and parents don't always see it as an opportunity. So I get pulled into some of those conversations. Not always fun. But yeah, it's important. And yeah. And see, Dylan, I think that's unfortunate. I do agree that being non-standard creates a need to be more, I would say, forthright. I would say not just explicit, but just forthright, to say, hey, here's how things are. But I just, I've never been like the whole trope of the girl who says, oh, it's fine. And that it's not fine.
You know that it's not fine.
Yeah. That's never been me. I'm like, I don't, why would you do that? I don't understand that.
You've always been very direct and very honest and very forthright.
I just yeah. Hi. For something a friend of yours said about the underlying philosophy of anarchy, namely that power is intrinsic, finite, and the theft of freedom is not its source. Well, I would be interested in knowing what your friend thinks the source. Why are you yelling? What is going on? I have a cat yelling at me from back over there. Something is going on. I guess there's like a bunny in the backyard.
There's a bunny in the back. Everybody look! What the hell is this thing?
I can be if I am indirect, it is deliberate, because I'm holding back to sort of, lead students, because I can't learn it for them. So as a teacher, you're trying to strike a balance between saying, here are the skills that I think that, or that our society says that you should master and be introduced to, and here are your opportunities and practice. Here are some things that you should practice. and, sort of leading them and guiding them, because you can't learn it for them. The cardinal doomsday anger has nothing to do with it. And you could, oh God, there are all kinds of people who are angry, who are not forthright at all. Who are not
forthright at all, exactly.
Oh my gosh, like they get in, they say, you know what you did, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'll take your word for it, because obviously I'm not supposed to ask you to tell me about it.
Yeah.
Or just, or who just like fume at you. And you're like, okay, so did I do something? Or
is something wrong?
I don't. Well, it's making its point. It's not making its point here. He's not coming to tell me anything. IDK, man. Something's going on out in the backyard. I guess there's bunnies.
Cats. Am I right?
One can only grow their own power by taking or stealing another's. That's something that I don't often get to talk to my students about, but something I've thought about is the idea of, oh golly.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you.
Adorable.
On Earth, we have a thing called tact. I'm aware that it exists.
Sometimes.
That it has been said to exist.
I've heard tales.
So Julius Caesar is part of the 10th grade curriculum, and this year it has not been as much of a priority as other things. Thank you, Chaplin. I do, man, when it just gets tingly in there, it's like, just do the thing. And it's nice. It just feels nice. But, you have like your dystopias and Julius Caesar and saying, too much power is a bad thing. Well, but it's also possible to have too little power, to not be able to, to have what you do not matter. That sucks.
Yeah.
To have what you do not make an influence on the situation. Oh, that sucks so much. So you can have too little power as well. And so there is a sense in which, my general concept of it is having power over yourself and your own decisions, and being able to create the environment and influence your environment in the way that to shape it in the way that you want it to be. I think that is a reasonable and healthy amount of power to have. It is when you have power and authority over others, especially in the case of when it's not questioned. Mm-hmm. That's when it starts to become problematic. For example, I have power and authority over my students. And when they question it, sometimes it's tiresome, but it's healthy for them to do that. Say, why are you there's a difference. Like sometimes students say, why are we doing this? And I can explain it to them. But like after years of teaching, you can tell there's a difference between when they say, what does this have to do with English class? Like when we're doing statistics and I'm like, well, let me tell you, I will just, but at the same time, there's sometimes when they're like, what does that have to do with English class? And they don't care about the answer.
They just don't want to do it.
They don't want to do it. They want you to spend class time when it could be either instruction or practice. They want to take some of that time and spend it not listening to you answer their question and just not doing any work. They want to just sort of have that be wasted time. And man, that gets under my skin. If you are going to ask a question, you darn well better be ready for the answer, to listen to it, because that ticks me off like few other things do. Especially if
they ask you a question.
If you ask me a question, you better be ready for me to tell you, to answer it, forthrightly.
To answer
answer it in good faith, because you better not be asking me a question in bad faith. I don't like that at all. Mm-mm.
And not just answer it forthrightly, but quite often answer it comprehensively.
Yeah,
you are a champion question answerer.
I do. I have to be careful, because I also have to think about, what is the lesson actually trying to accomplish? What skills am I, because I need to leave time for that. And I also need to leave enough time for them to actually practice what we're doing. Because if I just tell them about it and be like, okay, you got that, let's move on, they don't got it. Yes, John, exactly. Because once you start looking at the power to shape the world around you, that world around you probably includes people. So, where, the idea that my right to extend my fist extends only as far as somebody else's nose.
Mm-hmm.
That there's that idea as well. And so that has to be somewhat, I don't want to say exactly negotiated, but that's where you look for cooperation. I mean, because really, hopefully as human beings, we have developed empathy and community, and we mostly, in a healthy society, do not want to punch people in the nose. Mostly.
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 Yeah, the telling off teacher phase. I mean, and there's the take a breath moment, because like they're not asking in good faith. Know when that happens. But the thing is, they're kids. They're kids. They're kids. And it's Friday.
Right. And everybody wants to go home.
And the school year's been extended for like 2 weeks. And like, we don't know what's going to be happening with finals. They're still making us do standardized testing from the state, but it's not going to count. So why are we doing it? Because they tell us that we have to do it. And everybody's just like, oh, about it. So it's just like, well, that's when I sort of give the ultra condensed version of here's how this relates to the standards that our elected officials have not created, but supported. And if you think that should be different, tell your parents, because they can vote. And be aware of that, because in a few years, you can vote too. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you explain the election of your representative? Well, more
you
people.
You don't teach everybody in your district?
There are a lot of people in my district who don't agree with me. And again, kind of tying up with what Tokver and Shevik and Berap talked about, the idea of the weight of tradition. I mean, there are, I will do, I'll never vote for anything other than a Republican.
Yeah. And you can't talk them out of that. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, there are, you can't talk your way out of that. What you can do is listen, build relationships, be an authentic, an authentic version of yourself, be kind, and show that there are alternatives. That I supported this candidate, and here's why. Here's what I believe is important. Here's why. And so that hopefully I can be an example of someone who doesn't fit into that nice, neat mold of, oh, you're a terrible liberal. Well, hopefully I'm not terrible. And there's a whole political spectrum out there that you have yet to explore, clearly, because you're calling me a liberal. And we'll just let it go at that. So, yeah, gentlemen, exactly. Calcify, stagnate. There's that love. Calcify. Gosh, what a beautiful word.
It's perfectly, very apt when talking about the way that sort of habit and structure.
Yeah.
And not structure necessarily, but like just, custom and can destroy like representative democracy. Like, well, we're going to keep doing it this way because it's just the way we've always done it, and why change it?
Yeah, it's radical bacon. I'm so, yeah, you have my understanding.
Liberal communist, you liberal communist.
And Yeah, it's we were talking about this earlier with, the whole idea of political correctness and what it, what different ways of, sort of how it came about and what it actually, the problem with, what was originally called political correctness, the way it's the original problem with it was that it was more about expedience. Like you're going with the flow, you're quid pro quoing essentially is the problem with that. That it's not what you actually believe. You're just saying the only reason you're saying it is because
Yeah.
that's because it'll get you votes
It's what,
essentially.
yeah, it's what is expected of you, or it's what you think will benefit you the
And that's
most.
and
Yeah.
that's not what it has come the way that it has come to be used. And then also, the idea of, using social justice warrior as some kind of insult. So are you against society or are you against justice?
Yeah.
Which one of those don't you want to fight for?
Exactly.
And then likewise the idea of saying, of using woke ironically. So would you rather be asleep and,
Exactly.
or unconscious and ignorant? Like, what's the problem? Why are these words being used as bad? Or,
Yeah.
the idea of anti-fascism
As a bad thing.
as remotely a bad thing.
It's
Like,
Antifa's fault. What you so
are you pro-fascism?
you're anti-fascism.
You
So what's another way to say that?
A double negative has led to proof positive. I'm afraid you just are you trying to make me look stupid in front of the other guests? You don't need any help from me, sir. That's right. Oh, yeah, exactly. They're shibboleths.
Yeah,
Oh, but
totally. Another great word, by the way.
yes. And it's just, oh, gracious. Oh my goodness. Yeah, the leftist is not even a thing around here. Like people don't know what you're talking like
Well,
legitimately.
and a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that, I think, is the fault of is because we in the United States, and not all of us, but collectively, we have allowed the right, and especially the far right, to have so much influence over the political discourse, especially like the popular political discourse, the sort of mainstream political discourse, because people on the right, commentators and politicians and sort of, thought leaders on the right for decades and decades and decades have taken everyone to the left of them and smushed them all together into one category, and the term that they usually use for that category is liberal.
Yeah.
And so when a
But I mean,
Republican or a
part of that is
yeah,
that's to some degree it's the idea of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but also again it comes down to bad faith that they're not going to argue in good faith, and they're also willing to act the fool in order to get screen time and airtime. And that's, I mean, there's so much ridiculous nonsense from purported conservatives that are just freaking clowns.
oh,
But I
absolutely,
mean, that's what people see, and that's what becomes normative because, I mean, it's like driving past a really like a car that's on fire. I mean, how are you not going to not look?
right,
Especially when there are all these cars that are on fire and there's all this coverage of them because there's a bunch of cars that are on fire. It's not that there are cars that are on fire everywhere. There's one here and one there and one here and one there, but they're all being covered. And so like that's your feed is the
yeah.
cars that are on fire. And like, how can you not pay attention to this? Don't you care about our country
Don't you care about the cars
that are on
that
fire?
are on fire?
Ay.
Yeah,
So some random geek, when someone says, I am a leftist, the appropriate response is, really? What do you mean by that? Oh, tell me about that. How did you become a leftist? How did you come to that decision? The appropriate response is to just listen, man,
yeah,
form something of a bond and just go from there, because they probably don't mean the same thing that you mean, because there are a lot of differences, but man,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a lot. Chief Dancing Ostrich, I have some problems with that because I didn't want Hillary for president, but I voted for Clinton.
Yeah. Well,
There's a difference between what you want
yeah.
and what you do.
If I can be a little bit presumptuous, I think that's what Chief Dancing Ostrich is talking about.
I think
People
so.
people who refused to vote for her, and I don't.
I say again, I'm going to disagree because of the Electoral College, because I think some random geek didn't bother voting for Clinton because he knew he lived in a blue area and it's not going to matter.
Right. And I would have been in the same boat because Maryland was going to go Democratic no matter what. But I still fucking voted
Georgia
for it.
and we went blue and I helped.
You went blue this time, not last time, but this time you did.
Yes. That's right. We went blue for Biden. Sorry. But I did. I voted for Sanders in the primary, and then I voted for Clinton in the general.
Yeah. Which is exactly what I did.
Yes. And then I voted for Warren in the primary, and I voted for Biden in the general.
Yeah. And Warren was already out by the time my primary
but again,
I would have voted for
but I think the distinction is there because I have people on my feed who are just like burning your busters, and I'm just like I believe in a lot of the policies that you are supporting because Sanders and some of those politicians, I don't support them because those politicians support them. I support them because I think they are improvements. Exactly. Improvements. I also support other policies that don't go as far. I'm like, hey, I'll take that. If it's better than what I've got, I will take it. And then if we have something else that's better than that, I'll take that. I've got no problem with that.
Yeah.
So
man. I mean, like Bernie or bust is fine, but I mean, if he doesn't get the nomination, then you have. I mean, it's like
bust. Don't.
It's like rooting for a movie to win Best Picture that wasn't nominated. It's like you're wasting your time. That is no longer an option.
Yeah. Loretta Reyes, I do want to point out that classism is a thing, so be careful about that. In saying Marjorie Trailer Queen, it does rhyme. It's clever.
It's tempting because of the rhyme, but it's a little condescending because not everybody, believe it or not, and sometimes it's difficult for me to believe given the area that I live in, but believe it or not everybody who lives in a trailer is a rat bastard Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Some
random geek, the only improvement with Biden is Biden's COVID response. That's it. Dude, that is not nothing. I am so grateful for, every day I've got former students now who, they're like in their 20s and they're talking about, they're posting about how they've gotten their vaccination. I'm like, yay. Oh, golly.
Yeah, even if that, and by the way, I disagree. I don't think that's the only improvement. But even if it was, that would be enough because we have 500,000 dead people because of COVID.
But for me, I've got a student who's failing my class and is quarantined and can't. We're out in the boonies, y'all. Yeah. we're like, spitting distance from Gig City, and yet there's boonies.
Yeah.
And, a number of our students, this student has not been able to attend the meet or get the notes from the internet and has not consistently been able to email me back. And I'm just like, I hope you really are just quarantined. I hope you're not sick.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And I'm trying not to think about it a whole lot. I have one student who's gone just completely. I've not been able to get anybody at home. I've not gotten any response to email. The student has not been coming to class. The student is not a virtual student. And I'm just, you can't not, I can't not worry. Yeah. It's definitely, it's
a major improvement, but it's not it's what you're talking about is a good example, a good reminder that it's not over yet.
It's not.
A lot of us have been vaccinated. A lot more people are getting vaccinated every day. That's super important, but it's not over yet. You still need to behave like an adult and wear a mask and socially distance when you go out, because it's not
Um,
over yet.
Loretta, I can essentially it goes up the chain. I've asked guidance to connect with someone, but they haven't said anything to me, and I don't know how much of that is because I don't get to be in the loop, just student privacy type stuff, and how much of that is they're just overwhelmed too, because of course they're one of our guidance counselors said that in just crisis response for students who are having difficulty processing, like they're having to take care of younger siblings who are quarantined, or or who their daycare got quarantined and or shut down, and so they have to stay home, and then they're not really able to pay attention to the class, and they're falling behind, and they're stressed, and their parents are essential workers, and so like they're dealing with like the kids. Our students are just so stressed, and it's that's something that I'm having difficulty with as a teacher is how much do I dial my expectations back before it becomes a problem, and then they get to next year and they don't know what they're not ready. I've been told I'm pushing them too hard, which is generally how I roll. I push too hard, but we only have so many resources, and it's hard. It's really really hard.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, on that happy note.
Yay. But I mean,
shall-
I do think it's getting better. Yeah. Don't forget the charity links.
Charitylinks.page.
And it's in the description. Yes,
it is. It sure is. It sure as hell is.
So yeah, exactly, Radical Bacon. And we essentially, I have to remember that everybody has a lot going on. And the other thing that I struggle with is like, look, y'all, I'm fine if you're just passing. Just pass the class. That's all I want.
Yeah.
That doesn't fly in an honors class. Because that ain't gonna fly with people at home sometimes.
Right. Because if their kid is an honor student, they expect
they're
going to be acing it.
And I'm just we don't necessarily see eye to eye on that. Like I'm fine, I'm okay if your kid just passes with a D+, and they're not. So I'm just like, well, I'm just like, please, can your kid be allowed to have other priorities? But it's not my family. It's not my kid. And it's just, we have different priorities too. So I'm just like, oh gosh, I really, 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 if I'm ever a good girl for Christmas, Santa, what I want is for parents to stop hounding their kids about grades and to ask them what they've learned and what they've been doing. Please, 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 Santa. I realize Christmas is a long time away, but that would just be a perpetual Christmas wish for me.
You should write Santa a letter.
Oh, Santa, that's what I want. That's my Christmas wish.
I feel I feel a Mariah Carey song coming on.
Yeah, no, not right now.
Not right now. But anyway,
not without some more schnapps.
Baby. Before we wrap up, do you want to remind the fine folks about your YouTube channel? You had a video go up yesterday or today?
Yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday.
I did. So yeah, I had a video go up yesterday, and I have one scheduled for I think Tuesday, because I wouldn't want to compete with you, Steve, on Monday. So I have a lesson video going up on Tuesday, and then I don't have anything else planned.
The world is your oyster. It's wide open.
Cardinal Doomsday, I think I actually did a video about exams during the pandemic. And I talk about the history and purpose of exams. And it's not just to rank students. Actually, I gave that as Tough Question Tuesday to my students, I think last week, was I talked about the ESCA, the Education and Elementary and Secondary Education Act in 1965.
Yes.
And the original purpose of standardized testing is to make sure that across the country, students are being treated equitably, but also within schools, that male and female students are not being, given different tiers of education, that students are not being treated differently based on race, that they're not being treated differently based on national origin or religion, that students are getting equitable education. Mm-hmm. And I think that sense of exams is actually a good goal. I just am not convinced that the exams we have are particularly effective at that. Likewise, I don't like when exams are used to rank students. I don't like ranking children and like sorting them into like better in the whole competition between children. I'm not happy with that. So
that's what magic hats are for.
Exactly. But that doesn't, even magic hats don't sort them into better and worse.
It just divides them arbitrarily into different groups.
It's not arbitrary.
It's not arbitrary.
Despite what Joe Rowling says, we don't see any examples, especially in the early books, of the students get the house that they ask for. They get the house they want. That's what the hat chooses. That's the way the hat chooses. What do you want? Okay, you get that. But
So it's not the sorting hat, it's the pandering hat.
Absolutely.
It's whatever you want, kids.
It's what you choose. And then you're stuck with it for the next 7 years. Have fun with that.
have fun living with a choice you made when you were 11. Woohoo! And you're stuck with it.
So yeah. I talked, let's see, how far am I in Pride and Prejudice? I am now more than halfway.
You're in volume 3 now, right?
Yeah, I'm just starting volume 3. And I still do not like Mr. Darcy, and I'm liking Elizabeth less and less. It's going really well. See, exactly. Peter Pettigrew is a great example. He wanted to be in Gryffindor. He might have been a better fit somewhere else, but he wanted to be in Gryffindor. So.
And hence we have the flaw in the system.
Systems have flaws.
They're magic people. Just get someone to use like a mind reading spell and be like, okay, you belong over here. How hard is this?
There's not a magic spell for that, Steve.
Well, then make one up. It's all made up anyway.
Gasp. So reductive.
It's all made up.
So what?
I love how
So what? So is race. So is gender.
I love when people criticize, or when people respond to criticism of like a fictional thing by appealing to the rules of the made up fictional thing, as though
internal consistency,
as though the writer couldn't just make up something else. But real very quickly, and then we'll wrap it up. But when people complain, when like Star Trek fans who don't like the way the new shows look, they say, well, that's not what things looked like in the 23rd century. There is no 23rd. It's all made up. It looks however the people who make the show want it to look.
You don't know that. If Shevik is right, there is a 23rd century. Well,
there's going to be eventually.
Not going to be. It already exists.
Well, that's true. Simultaneity. That's
exactly.
True.
Thank you very much.
Brought it back around to the book. Brought it back to the book. You're good.
I'm such an English teacher.
You're good.
Bring it back to the book. Let's return to the text, students.
Yes, and especially appropriate for this book. Let's return to where we started.
Oh!
So, hey, come on.
True journey is return.
Exactly. So anyway, so Dana's YouTube channel is linked in the description of this video. And Dana and I will be back next week on Wednesday for the next episode of Trek Reluctantly. Where we will be watching the next episode of Firefly, which I believe is The Messenger or The Message.
Mine are out of order, so we're watching. Mine are in the order they aired.
Right.
So I go by whatever you
Yeah,
say.
it's the
like, okay,
message or the messenger or whatever, but it's the message something is in the title. But anyway, that's the one we're watching next. And then in 2 weeks from tonight, we will be back to start because we're going to keep the same schedule. We're not going to take a break.
I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
We will be back to begin our next book series. We'll continue doing Read Away, and our next book will be The Other Wes Moore.
So
by
I
Wes Moore.
Okay, so this one has chapters. I would suggest reading the introduction, as well as there's like a little interlude, I'll say, that's in italics, and then chapter 1. So it's not, don't just skip ahead to chapter 1, or you'll miss some good stuff, and you don't want to miss that.
Read the intro and
the interlude.
The interlude and then chapter 1. So
the intro and the interlude and chapter 1.
There you go. So there you go. There's your homework. No, it's Loretta. It's Wes Moore. The Other Wes Moore, like WES space.
Like that.
Yeah, MOORE.
Yeah, like I just put it in chat, genius.
Yeah. Well, pardon me.
You're pardoned, Steve.
Thank you.
I pardon you. Not that I got any authority, but whatever I got, it pardons you.
You could have gone Salieri from Amadeus and really won me over. I absolve you. Yeah, I absolve you.
You didn't ask to be absolved, Steve. You asked to be pardoned.
Mediocrity's everywhere. I absolve you. I absolve you. Anyway, so yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks to start The Other Wes Moore, and I'll be back a week from tonight to do the next Ask Away. And
don't forget, Steve, as your producer is reminding you, you got a patron hangout.
That's right. The patron hangout is this Sunday. That's right. Sunday starting at noon Eastern as usual, and that's this weekend too. So that'll be fun as always. Also, the new episode of the Late Seating podcast went up today. It's Jason and I reviewing The Sandlot. I know a lot of people really like that movie. If you are one of those people and you're super attached to The Sandlot, maybe don't listen to our podcast because you won't have a good time. Because neither Jason nor I thought it was a very good movie, but if you want to hear, go ahead.
That also means that the other podcast went up too, didn't it?
Not until next week.
Oh, we're every other week.
It's every other week. So next Friday will be the next episode of the Ensign's Log, starring not only myself and Jason, but also your fine self.
Have I just been wrong this entire time? Has it been every other week the whole time?
They alternate. Yeah.
Wow.
It's late seating one week and Ensign's Log the next week.
Because we record them on the same day. I've always, just sort of had it in my head. So I think I've the late seatings that I've listened to like a week late.
That's why we leave them up. But yeah, so when the new Ensign's Log comes out next week, be sure to listen to that too, because it's we already recorded it. It's really good.
It's definitely interesting.
Yes, it is. It goes to some interesting places.
Yeah. But it's very splashy.
It makes quite a splash. Yes, it makes quite a splash.
All right.
So anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Dana, of course, thank you for joining me as always, and thank you for suggesting that we read this book, because I did really enjoy this book.
I'm so glad you did.
And I'm really looking forward to the next one. Thanks for having me
here, and thank you for reading the book with me, Steve.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
No.
It was both our pleasures. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a good weekend.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.